Don't waste this courtroom's time. Men like you always claim they're innocent after the evidence catches up.
I'm not asking you to believe me, Your Honor. I'm asking you to look at the evidence before judging me.
The evidence says you murdered a man, and that's the only story anyone in this courtroom needs.
Then let my lawyer speak before you decide the rest of my life.
Your lawyer isn't going to save you. Tomorrow, you'll be locked away for the rest of your life, and this case will be over.
The courtroom fell silent as the judge leaned back smugly. The elderly man stayed calm, while the bailiff tightened the chain around his wrists. The courtroom doors burst open.
Stop this trial right now, Your Honor. I represent Mr. Garrison, and I have evidence proving he was framed.
Judge Thaddeus Crowell had no idea she was the homeless girl Isaiah rescued 25 years earlier. The amber light of sunset streamed through the dirty windows of Isaiah's garage, casting long shadows across oil-stained concrete. The familiar scent of motor oil and old metal filled the air as Conrad Renshaw stepped through the side door, his expensive suit looking completely out of place among the bus parts and repair tools scattered throughout the workspace. Isaiah didn't look up from the transmission he was rebuilding. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, each motion deliberate and controlled. "Garage is closed, Mr. Renshaw. We need to talk." Conrad's voice carried the confident tone of a man used to getting his way. "About these complaints you've been filing with the city." Outside, Isaiah could hear the murmur of voices. Mrs. Washington, Mr. Thompson, and half a dozen other elderly residents had followed Conrad here. They pressed against the windows, their worried faces peering through the glass. These were people who had lived in Founders Row for 40, 50 years. People who had raised their children in these houses, buried their parents from these front porches. Isaiah finally straightened, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. At 68, he still carried himself like the Army combat engineer he'd once been. Calm, alert, ready. "Nothing to discuss. Those deeds you're pushing are fake." Conrad pulled out a thick envelope from his jacket. $50,000. Cash. "All you have to do is stop interfering with our development plans. Keep your money." Isaiah's voice stayed level, but his eyes hardened. "These folks aren't selling because they don't want to sell. Period. You don't understand the bigger picture here." Conrad stepped closer, his tone becoming more aggressive. "This neighborhood is getting torn down one way or another. The city council has already approved the courthouse expansion. Judge Crowell himself signed off on the zoning changes." Isaiah reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. He'd been carrying it to every meeting for weeks now. "Say that again about Judge Crowell." Conrad's face went pale. "Turn that thing off." "Public conversation in a public place?" Isaiah kept the recorder running. "You just admitted a sitting judge approved illegal property seizures. That's conspiracy, Mr. Renshaw." "You don't know what you're messing with," Conrad hissed. "There are powerful people involved in this project. People who don't like being challenged by what? An old black man who fixes buses?" Isaiah stepped forward, and despite being 20 years older, his presence filled the garage. "I've been dealing with powerful people my whole life. They bleed just like everybody else." The elderly residents outside pressed closer to the windows. Mrs. Washington tapped on the glass, worry etched across her face. Isaiah raised his hand slightly, signaling them to stay back. Conrad glanced around nervously. "Those deeds are perfectly legal. Every signature has been notarized. Forged signatures don't become real just because someone stamps them." Isaiah clicked off the recorder and slipped it back into his pocket. "When those papers get reviewed in open court, your whole scheme falls apart. You're making a serious mistake. The only mistake was thinking you could steal from these people without anyone fighting back." Isaiah picked up a wrench from his workbench, examining its worn surface. "My neighbors built this community with their bare hands, worked double shifts to pay for these houses. raised their families here when nobody else would let them buy property anywhere else. Conrad backed toward the door, his confidence cracking. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Isaiah set the wrench down carefully. Get out of my garage. After Conrad left, the elderly residents slowly dispersed. Mrs. Washington lingered longest, pressing her palm against the window before finally walking away. The garage fell quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic and the settling sounds of old building. Isaiah returned to his work, but his mind stayed alert. Something about Conrad's fear felt wrong. The man had looked genuinely terrified when Judge Crowell's name came up. At 11:30, his phone buzzed. Conrad's name appeared on the screen. I need to see you. Conrad's voice was urgent, almost panicked. At your garage, right now. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. You don't understand. I was wrong about everything. Judge Crowell, he's been protecting this operation for 30 years. I have proof, documents, names, everything. Isaiah gripped the phone tighter. What kind of proof? A ledger, financial records. It shows how they've been stealing black-owned property since the 1990s. Judges, cops, developers, the whole network. Conrad's breathing sounded ragged. I can't do this anymore. My conscience won't let me. Why should I trust you? Because they're going to kill me if they find out I'm talking. The line went quiet for a moment. I'll bring you the ledger before midnight. Everything you need to stop them. Isaiah arrived at his garage 20 minutes later. The security light cast harsh shadows across the parking area as he unlocked the side door. The familiar smell of motor oil greeted him, but something else lingered in the air. Something metallic and wrong. Conrad? He called out. A groan echoed from behind the lifted bus at the far end of the garage. Isaiah moved quickly through the narrow space between workbenches and tool cabinets. Conrad lay crumpled beside a pool of dark blood, his expensive suit torn and stained. A heavy wrench lay beside his head, its surface gleaming wet. Help. Me? Conrad's voice came out as barely a whisper. Isaiah dropped to his knees, pressing his hands against the worst wound. Blood seeped through his fingers. Who did this to you? Conrad's eyes focused on Isaiah's face with tremendous effort. The ledger. Hidden courthouse. Then his breathing stopped. Isaiah checked for a pulse, finding nothing. He reached for his phone to call 911, but the sound of squealing tires outside made him freeze. Blue and red lights suddenly flooded the garage windows. Captain Everett Bale burst through the door with 2 uniformed officers behind him. His cold eyes took in the scene. Isaiah kneeling beside Conrad's body, blood covering his hands and work clothes. Well, looks like our neighborhood hero decided to solve his property problems the old-fashioned way. Bale's voice carried cruel satisfaction. I found him like this, Isaiah said, slowly standing. I called you as soon as... You didn't call anybody. Bale picked up the bloodied wrench with a handkerchief. But you sure left your fingerprints all over the murder weapon. Isaiah's stomach dropped. He'd handled that same wrench earlier while talking to Conrad. His prints would be all over it. Check the security cameras, Isaiah said firmly. They'll show exactly what happened. Bale glanced at the camera mounted in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. Sure thing. We'll take real good care of that footage. The officers grabbed Isaiah's arms, forcing them behind his back. The handcuffs bit into his wrists as they tightened. Isaiah Garrison, you're under arrest for the murder of Conrad Renshaw. Outside, news vans were already pulling up. Camera crews spilled onto the sidewalk, their bright lights turning the night into artificial day. Someone had tipped them off. On your knees, one officer barked, shoving Isaiah down onto the concrete. The cameras rolled as Isaiah was forced into a humiliating position beside Conrad's body. Reporters shouted questions through the open door, while police officers made a show of collecting evidence. Captain Bale stepped close to Isaiah's ear. 68 years old, and you still haven't learned your place. Maybe prison will teach you some respect. Isaiah said nothing. He watched Bale's face, memorizing every detail. This wasn't random. This wasn't justice. This was something else entirely. As the officers hauled him toward the patrol car, Isaiah caught a glimpse of movement near the security camera. A figure in dark clothing reached up and removed something small from the mounting bracket. The fluorescent lights in Judge Thaddeus Crowell's courtroom hummed like angry insects. Isaiah sat in the defendant's chair, his wrists still bearing red marks from the handcuffs. The early morning light filtering through tall windows made everything look cold and lifeless. Judge Crowell entered with measured steps, his black robes flowing behind him like funeral cloth. At 72, he carried himself with the authority of a man who had never been challenged. His gray hair was perfectly combed, and his pale blue eyes swept the courtroom with practiced indifference. "The State versus Isaiah Garrison," the clerk announced. Prosecutor Helena Voss rose from her table, her blonde hair pulled back severely. She wore a navy suit that made her look like ice carved into human shape. In her hands, she held a tablet computer. "Your Honor, the State has compelling evidence against Mr. Garrison." Her voice carried no emotion, no doubt. "We have security footage showing the defendant entering his garage at 11:47 p.m. on the night Conrad Renshaw was murdered." She tapped the tablet screen. The courtroom's monitor flickered to life, showing grainy black-and-white footage. Isaiah watched himself unlock the garage door and disappear inside. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. 20 minutes later, the footage showed him emerging, looking around nervously before driving away. Something was wrong. The footage jumped slightly at the 11:47 mark, like someone had cut out a piece. "The victim was found at 12:15 a.m. with his skull crushed," Voss continued. "The defendant's fingerprints cover the murder weapon. His clothes were soaked in Mr. Renshaw's blood." Public Defender Martin Pike stood up slowly. He was younger than Isaiah expected, maybe 44, with tired eyes and a wrinkled suit that had seen better days. Dark circles under his eyes suggested too many cases and not enough sleep. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. We request additional time to examine this evidence. The footage appears to have irregularities that need investigation." Judge Crowell's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Pike, this court will not indulge fishing expeditions. The evidence is clear. But, Your Honor, the defendant is a violent man from a violent neighborhood." Crowell's voice carried contempt. "Men like Mr. Garrison solve their problems with their fists. Always have." Isaiah felt heat rise in his chest. Violent? He'd never been arrested for anything more serious than a parking ticket. He'd spent his life teaching young men to control their anger, not surrender to it. "Furthermore," Crowell continued, "given the brutal nature of this crime and the defendant's obvious disregard for human life, he will remain shackled during all proceedings." The bailiff approached with heavy ankle chains. The metal scraped against the floor as Isaiah was forced to lift his feet. The chains were designed for dangerous criminals, not elderly mechanics. Pike's face flushed red. "Your Honor, Mr. Garrison has no history of violence. He's 68 years old, with a clean record spanning 50 years. Are you questioning this court's judgment, Mr. Pike? I'm requesting reasonable accommodations for an elderly defendant who poses no flight risk." Crowell's gavel slammed down. "Request denied. We'll begin jury selection at 2 o'clock this afternoon." Pike shot to his feet. "Your Honor, that's impossible. I need time to investigate the evidence. Interview witnesses. You have 6 hours, Mr. Pike. Use them wisely." Isaiah had heard enough. He struggled to his feet, the ankle chains clanking with every movement. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom. "Your Honor, Conrad Renshaw called me that night because he wanted to expose stolen property deeds. He was bringing me evidence of fraud involving courthouse officials." The entire courtroom went silent. Crowell's face darkened like storm clouds gathering. Mr. Garrison, you will sit down and remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt. Conrad told me about judges and developers stealing from black families for 30 years. He said some officials wore special rings to identify each other. Voss stood quickly. Your Honor, the defendant is clearly fabricating. He's dead because he grew a conscience, Isaiah continued, his voice growing stronger. Not because I killed him. Crowell's knuckles went white as he gripped his gavel. Mr. Garrison, sit down immediately or face additional charges. The footage has been altered. Someone cut out 12 seconds right at the timestamp. Contempt of court! Crowell's voice boomed through the chamber. Bailiff, remove this man immediately. As the bailiff approached, Isaiah caught sight of Captain Bale near the back of the courtroom. The police captain's thick arms were crossed over his chest, and his cold eyes never left Isaiah's face. But what made Isaiah's blood run cold was the ring on Bale's right hand, a heavy gold band with the courthouse seal, identical to the one Conrad had described during their phone call. The bailiff grabbed Isaiah's arm, but Pike stepped between them. Your Honor, my client has a right to speak in his own defense. Not when he's disrupting my courtroom with wild conspiracy theories. Outside the courtroom, Captain Bale cornered Isaiah near the prisoner transport area. The hallway was empty except for 2 guards who suddenly found reasons to look the other way. You're making this harder than it needs to be, old man. Bale's voice was low and threatening. Conrad Renshaw was a troubled businessman who got mixed up with dangerous people. You killed him during a robbery gone wrong. That's not what happened. It's what happened if you want Founders Row to survive this week. Bale stepped closer, his badge catching the fluorescent light. Confess. Take your 25 to life and your neighbors get to keep their homes. Keep fighting, and every house on that block gets condemned for safety violations. Isaiah studied Bale's face, memorizing the cruel satisfaction in his eyes. Why are you so eager to see me convicted? Because men like you need to learn their place. Bale turned and walked away, his heavy boots echoing down the empty corridor. The courthouse ring on his finger caught the light one more time before he disappeared around a corner. Back in the consultation room, Pike slumped into a plastic chair across from Isaiah. His briefcase contained maybe a dozen files, and his legal pad was already full of hasty notes. I have to be honest with you, Pike said quietly. I've got 47 other cases this month. I don't have investigators, expert witnesses, or lab technicians. Crowell knows this. He's counting on it. Isaiah nodded slowly. So what do? We fight with what we have and hope for a miracle. At exactly 2 o'clock, Judge Crowell returned to his bench. The courtroom was packed now. Reporters, curious citizens, and a few residents from Founders Row who'd managed to take time off work. Isaiah's ankle chains scraped against the floor as he was led back to the defendant's table. We'll now begin jury selection in the matter of State versus Isaiah Garrison. The potential jurors filed in, mostly white faces, mostly middle class, mostly people who'd never set foot in Founders Row. Isaiah watched them avoid eye contact as the prosecutor began her questioning. This wasn't justice. This was theater. Isaiah struggled to his feet again, the chains making every movement awkward and humiliating. Your Honor, I demand that the security footage be examined by independent experts. 12 seconds were removed. Mr. Garrison, Crowell's voice cracked like a whip. You will remain silent or be removed from this courtroom permanently. The missing footage shows someone else entering that garage before I arrived. Crowell raised his gavel high, his face twisted with rage. That is enough. Just as the gavel began its descent toward the bench, the rear courtroom doors slammed open with tremendous force. Every head in the room turned as a woman rushed down the center aisle, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor. She carried 3 thick legal files in her arms, and moved with the focused determination of someone who belonged exactly where she was going. The courtroom doors burst open with a thunderous crash that silenced every whispered conversation. Heads turned as a woman strode down the center aisle, her heels clicking against the worn marble floor like gunshots. She wore a sharp black suit that commanded respect, and her dark eyes burned with fierce determination. "Your Honor, I am Naomi Ellison, licensed attorney," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed courtroom. "I am filing an emergency motion for admission to represent Mr. Isaiah Garrison." Judge Crowell's face darkened. "Ms. Ellison, this court is in session. You cannot simply—" "I have the proper documentation." Naomi reached the defense table and slammed down a thick folder. "Emergency admission order from the State Bar, filed 30 minutes ago and approved by the administrative judge." The bailiff moved toward Isaiah, reaching for his chains. Naomi stepped between them, her small frame blocking the much larger man. "Touch my client again, and I'll file a federal civil rights complaint before lunch," she said coldly. Isaiah stared at the woman defending him. Something familiar tugged at his memory. Those eyes, that fierce expression he'd seen before. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Naomi continued, "the man you're treating like a common criminal saved my life 25 years ago. When I was 11 years old and sleeping behind the Bellwether bus terminal in freezing weather, Isaiah Garrison found me." The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. My mother had vanished without explanation. No agency would take responsibility for a homeless black child. I was starving and scared, clutching nothing but a photograph of the woman who'd abandoned me. Naomi's voice grew stronger with each word. "Isaiah didn't just call social services. He brought me to his own home that night, fed me, found a safe foster family who treated me like their own daughter. He quietly paid for my school supplies, my books, my clothes." Isaiah's eyes widened as recognition flooded through him. The scared little girl with defiant eyes. The child who'd refused to cry even when she was shivering from cold and hunger. "He taught me never to surrender my dignity to people who measure human worth by money or skin color," Naomi said, looking directly at Crowell. "That's why I became a civil rights attorney. That's why I'm here." Crowell's jaw tightened. "Very touching, Ms. Ellison, but sentiment doesn't change evidence. Then let's discuss evidence." Naomi opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet computer. "The prosecution's security footage has been deliberately altered. 12 seconds were removed from the timestamp between 11:47 and 11:48 p.m. The prosecutor shot to his feet. "Objection! That's impossible. Furthermore," Naomi continued, ignoring the interruption, "if you examine the reflection in the garage window during the remaining footage, you can clearly see a second figure entering the building before my client arrived." She swiped to another document on her tablet. "I also have medical records from Bellwether General Hospital showing that Isaiah Garrison injured his right hand 3 weeks ago while repairing a transmission. Dr. Martinez's examination confirms severe tendon damage that would make gripping a heavy weapon impossible." Naomi held up the medical file. "The fatal blows were delivered by someone with full strength in both hands. My client couldn't have physically committed this crime." The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Several jurors leaned forward in their seats while reporters frantically took notes. Judge Crowell banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order in this court!" "Your Honor," Naomi pressed, "given this new evidence, I request immediate dismissal of all charges and my client's release." Motion denied. Crowell's voice carried icy finality. "The court recognizes you as counsel, Ms. Ellison, but this defendant remains in custody pending further proceedings." The bailiff stepped forward again, this time with backup deputies. Isaiah rose slowly, his chains clanking as he prepared to be led away. "This isn't over," Naomi called out as the deputies flanked Isaiah. "I will uncover every detail of this conspiracy, every lie, every corrupt official who participated. As Isaiah was escorted toward the side door, Judge Crowell pulled out his phone beneath the bench. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing a message to Captain Bale. "Stop her before she finds the ledger." The courtroom doors closed behind Isaiah with a final, echoing thud. The courthouse holding room smelled of industrial disinfectant and fear. Gray concrete walls surrounded a metal table bolted to the floor, where Isaiah sat across from Naomi, his wrists still cuffed to a chain around his waist. Martin Pike spread manila folders between them, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Everything's yours now," Pike said quietly. "Case files, witness statements, evidence logs, what little we have." Naomi studied Isaiah's weathered face, searching for traces of the man who'd saved her decades ago. His brown eyes held the same steady calm she remembered, even with purple bruises marking his left cheek. "Tell me what really happened," she said. Isaiah leaned forward slightly, the chain limiting his movement. "Conrad Renshaw called me 3 days before he died. Said he couldn't sleep anymore, couldn't look at himself in the mirror." Pike pulled out a yellow legal pad and began taking notes as Isaiah continued. "Conrad told me his company didn't just buy property in Founders Row, they stole it. Judge Crowell, Captain Bale, bankers at First National, half a dozen developers. They've been working together for 30 years. "How?" Naomi asked. "Forged tax bills, false foreclosure notices. When elderly folks couldn't afford the fake amounts, the bank seized their homes for pennies on the dollar." Isaiah's voice grew harder. "If anyone fought back, Bale's officers would find drugs in their house or arrest them for disturbing the peace. Crowell made sure they got maximum sentences." Naomi felt ice form in her stomach. Conrad had proof? A ledger? Names, dates, property addresses, bank account numbers, everything. Isaiah's eyes met hers. "That's why I went to the garage that night. Conrad was supposed to give me the evidence." Pike looked up from his notes. "But someone got there first." "Had to be. Conrad was already dead when I walked in, blood everywhere. The murder weapon was sitting right on my workbench, like someone wanted me to pick it up." Naomi opened her laptop and pulled up the case file. "The prosecution claims they have Conrad's complete digital records, bank statements, emails, business files." "Then where's the encrypted message?" Isaiah asked. "What encrypted message?" Isaiah shifted in his chair, the chains clinking. "Conrad scheduled an email to send automatically if something happened to him. Said it would go to 3 newspapers and the FBI. He showed me on his phone." Naomi's fingers flew across the keyboard, scrolling through the evidence list. "I don't see any scheduled emails in the prosecution's files." "Because they deleted it," Pike said grimly. "Or stole it." 20 minutes later, Naomi burst through the courtroom doors with Pike behind her, their arms full of legal documents. Judge Crowell was reviewing afternoon motions while Helena Voss sat at the prosecutor's table, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. "Your Honor," Naomi announced, "I demand immediate production of Conrad Renshaw's complete digital files, including all scheduled emails and deleted items." Voss stood smoothly. "The prosecution has provided all relevant materials." "Then explain this." Naomi slammed a printout on the evidence table. "Technical analysis shows Conrad's email server received an auto-schedule command 3 hours before his death. The email was programmed to send at midnight, but it never arrived at its destinations." "Objection," Voss said coldly. "This analysis is untimely and unverified." Crowell nodded. "Sustained. The court will not consider evidence submitted without proper notice. Furthermore," Naomi continued, ignoring the ruling, "I demand the original security drive from the garage, not a copy, the original." Voss's composed mask slipped slightly. "The drive was damaged during processing. Convenient, just like the missing 12 seconds of footage." "Your Honor," Voss said, her voice rising, "Ms. Ellison is grandstanding. The defendant is a known neighborhood agitator who has spent years intimidating property owners and interfering with legitimate business. The gallery murmured angrily. Several elderly residents from Founders Row shifted in their seats. Agitator? Naomi's voice carried across the packed courtroom. For helping his neighbors understand their legal rights? For organizing resistance to lawful foreclosure proceedings, Voss snapped. For encouraging people to ignore court orders. Naomi pulled 3 documents from her briefcase. Speaking of court orders, let's examine these property transfer deeds. All 3 were notarized on March 15th by Rebecca Martinez. But according to county records, Ms. Martinez was in the hospital recovering from surgery that entire week. She held up the papers. Same impossible notary date, same handwriting, same fraudulent signature. The gallery erupted in shocked whispers. One elderly woman stood up and pointed at Voss. "That's my grandmother's house. They said she owed back taxes." "Order!" Crowell banged his gavel furiously. "Remove that woman from my courtroom." But more residents were standing now, voices rising as they recognized their stolen properties in Naomi's evidence. "My family's land. They took everything. We never owed those taxes." As chaos spread through the gallery, a courthouse clerk approached Naomi's table. The young woman glanced nervously toward the judge's bench, then slipped a folded note into Naomi's hand before hurrying away. Naomi unfolded the paper beneath the table. 7 words were scrawled in desperate handwriting. Transport route changed. They're moving him early. Her blood turned to ice. She looked at the clock on the courtroom wall. 4:30. "This hearing is adjourned," Crowell announced suddenly, his gavel striking with finality. "The defendant will be transported back to holding immediately." "Your Honor, I haven't finished." "Court is dismissed, Ms. Ellison." Naomi grabbed Pike's arm as the bailiffs moved toward the side door where Isaiah would be brought through. "They're going to kill him during transport." Pike's face went white. "We have to stop this." They raced through the courthouse corridors, pushing past lawyers and clerks. Naomi's heels echoed against marble floors as they took the stairs 3 at a time toward the underground loading area. The service elevator was descending when they reached the basement level. Naomi could hear the mechanical whir of the doors opening, then voices and footsteps moving toward the vehicle bay. She sprinted down the narrow hallway, Pike struggling to keep up behind her. The loading bay doors were already closing as she burst through the security checkpoint. Outside in the fading afternoon light, a white transport van was pulling away from the courthouse. Its windows were tinted black, making it impossible to see inside. 20 feet behind it, an unmarked black SUV followed through the service gate. Both vehicles disappeared around the corner into downtown traffic. Naomi stood breathing hard in the empty loading bay, her hands clenched into fists. The courthouse clerk's warning had come too late. Isaiah was gone. The transport van's engine rumbled as it turned off the main highway onto a narrow county road. Isaiah sat in the back row, handcuffs biting into his wrists, watching the 2 guards in front exchange meaningful glances. "Where are we going?" asked Martinez, one of 3 inmates shackled to the metal bench across from Isaiah. "This ain't the way to county." "Shut up," growled Officer Daniels from the driver's seat. His partner, Officer Brooks, kept checking his phone and scanning the empty roadside. Isaiah studied the van's interior. Metal walls, single aisle between benches. No windows except the reinforced glass partition separating them from the guards. The 3 inmates, Martinez, a thin man with gang tattoos, Foster, built like a linebacker with scarred knuckles, and Williams, wiry and twitchy like a street fighter, had been quiet since pickup. Too quiet. The van slowed beneath a concrete overpass where graffiti covered the support pillars. No traffic, no witnesses, just empty farmland stretching toward the darkening horizon. "End of the line," Brooks announced, climbing out. Daniels killed the engine. Both guards walked to the rear doors, keys jingling. The sound echoed off concrete above them. "Listen up," Daniels said as he unlocked the van. You three got a job. Teach the old man some silence. Make it hurt, but don't kill him yet. Martinez grinned, revealing gold teeth. How much silence we talking about? Enough so he stops causing trouble for important people. Brooks unlocked the inmates' restraints one by one. The chains fell to the van floor with metallic clanks. Foster cracked his knuckles. Williams bounced on his toes like a boxer warming up. Isaiah remained perfectly still. He'd been in worse situations during his army days. Tight spaces, multiple attackers, limited options. The key was staying calm and using everything as a weapon, including the attacker's overconfidence. "Nothing personal, old man," Martinez said, stepping into the narrow aisle. "Just business." Isaiah shifted slightly, protecting his injured right hand against his chest. His left was still strong. His feet were steady. And after 30 years of teaching young men to box, he understood exactly how violence moved through confined spaces. Foster lunged first, throwing a wild haymaker down the aisle. Isaiah ducked and drove his left elbow into Foster's solar plexus. The big man doubled over, gasping. Isaiah grabbed Foster's shirt and used his momentum to slam him headfirst into the van wall. Foster dropped like a sack of grain. Williams came next, faster and smarter, throwing sharp jabs. Isaiah slipped the first 2 punches and caught Williams's wrist on the third. He twisted hard, hearing bones crack, then drove his knee into Williams's ribs. Williams screamed and crumpled against the bench. Martinez pulled a makeshift shiv from his boot, a sharpened piece of metal wrapped with electrical tape. He slashed wildly in the cramped space, catching Isaiah across the forearm. Blood soaked through Isaiah's sleeve. "Cut him up good," Daniels called from outside. "Make him bleed." Isaiah backed toward the van's rear, drawing Martinez forward. When the younger man overextended with another slash, Isaiah grabbed his wrist and twisted until the shiv clattered to the floor. Then he drove 3 quick punches into Martinez's kidney area, not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to drop him. Foster was climbing to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. He grabbed a loose restraint chain and swung it like a whip, catching Isaiah across the throat. Isaiah staggered backward, choking. Foster wrapped the chain around his neck and pulled tight. "Sleep time, Grandpa." Isaiah couldn't breathe. Dark spots danced in his vision, but he'd been choked before. He knew how to survive it. Instead of pulling at the chain, Isaiah stepped backward and slammed Foster against the van wall. Once. Twice. On the third impact, Foster's grip loosened. Isaiah spun and landed a perfect left hook to Foster's jaw. The big man collapsed unconscious. All 3 attackers lay groaning on the van floor. "What the hell?" Daniels climbed into the van, pistol drawn. "You were supposed to beat him senseless." "They tried," Isaiah said quietly, wiping blood from his cut arm. "Army taught me different lessons than prison did them." Brooks appeared behind Daniels, also armed. "Shoot him. Say he tried to escape." "Wait." Captain Everett Bale's voice cut through the evening air as he approached the van. "Let me handle this personally." Bale stepped into view wearing civilian clothes and latex gloves. His service weapon was already drawn. "Isaiah Garrison," Bale said with a cold smile. "Always causing problems. Always thinking you're better than everyone else in that neighborhood." "Just teaching kids to fix engines and throw punches," Isaiah replied. "Didn't know that threatened anybody. It threatens the right people, the people who matter in this town." Bale raised his pistol. "You should have taken the settlement offer and moved away quietly. Now you'll die trying to escape custody. These 3 inmates will swear you attacked them first." The sound of a car engine made everyone freeze. Headlights swept across the overpass as a vehicle approached fast. "Move," Brooks muttered. "Someone's coming." The car skidded to a stop 50 yards away. A door slammed. Footsteps ran across gravel. "Isaiah!" Naomi's voice echoed off concrete. "State Patrol is 2 minutes out. I've got everything recorded." She held up her phone, its camera light visible in the darkness. Bale cursed and holstered his weapon. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Naomi said firmly. "I tracked your route through traffic cameras, recorded your threats, and uploaded everything to federal servers in real time." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Bale and his officers retreated to their patrol cars and disappeared into the night, leaving the injured inmates moaning in the van. 3 hours later, Isaiah lay in a hospital bed with stitches in his forearm and bruises covering his torso. A state trooper stood guard outside his door. Naomi sat in the chair beside him, reviewing the recorded evidence on her phone. "The attack proves it," Isaiah said quietly. "The ledger exists. Renshaw was telling the truth about the records." Naomi looked up from her phone. "What ledger? What records?" "Property transfers, forged deeds, jury tampering, everything Conrad promised to give me." Isaiah winced as he shifted position. "They wouldn't risk killing me unless those documents could destroy them. Where are these records hidden?" "That's what I was supposed to learn before he died." Naomi stood and walked to the window. Downtown Bellwether stretched below them, streetlights illuminating the old courthouse where Judge Crowell had humiliated Isaiah just hours earlier. "We'll find them," she said. "We'll expose every corrupt official, every stolen property, every fraudulent foreclosure. I promise you, Founders Row will be saved." Across town, Captain Bale stood in his office reviewing patrol assignments for the next morning. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Search every house, find the records, use maximum force." He smiled grimly and began typing deployment orders. At dawn, 30 officers would sweep through Founders Row with warrants for weapons violations and outstanding traffic citations. By breakfast, Isaiah's neighborhood would be in ruins. At first light, police trucks rumbled down Founders Row's narrow streets like an invading army. Captain Bale sat in the lead vehicle, reviewing search warrants that had been signed just hours earlier by a compliant judge. The papers authorized searches for weapons violations and outstanding citations, but everyone knew the real target: the ledger, the records that could destroy them all. Isaiah lay in his hospital bed, watching the sunrise through bulletproof glass. A state trooper stood guard outside his door, but inside he felt more trapped than protected. His phone had been confiscated as evidence, cutting him off from the neighborhood he'd spent decades defending. Down in Founders Row, doors began splintering. "Police! Open up!" Officer Brooks kicked in Ruth Delaney's front door without waiting for an answer. The 70-year-old retired principal stood in her kitchen wearing a flowered robe, coffee cup trembling in her hands. "Where's your warrant?" Ruth demanded. Brooks shoved the papers at her face. "Traffic violations and weapons check. Everyone out. Now." "I don't own any weapons, and I haven't driven in 3 years." "Tell it to the judge." 2 officers pushed past Ruth and began tearing through her living room. They dumped photo albums onto the floor, scattered legal documents, and swept decades of community records into garbage bags. Framed pictures of Ruth's students crashed against the walls, glass shards mixed with torn papers and family memories. "Stop it!" Ruth tried to protect a portrait of her late husband. "That's all I have left of him." Brooks grabbed her wrists and snapped on handcuffs. "Interfering with police business." Outside, the same scene repeated at every house. Elderly residents sat on curbs in their nightclothes, wrists zip-tied behind their backs, watching officers destroy their homes. Mrs. Washington, 83 years old and using a walker, was handcuffed to her own porch railing while police ransacked her bedroom. Mr. Thompson, a Korean War veteran, was shoved to his knees when he asked to see the warrant authorizing the seizure of his Purple Heart certificate. Captain Bale stood in the middle of it all, directing the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra of destruction. At the hospital, Naomi paced Isaiah's room while arranging private security. I'm hiring independent guards, she told him. Former military. Men who won't take orders from corrupt cops. You need to get to the neighborhood, Isaiah said urgently. They're not just searching. They're destroying everything that could help us. I won't leave you unprotected. I'm safer here than anyone in Founders Row right now. 20 minutes later, 2 armed security contractors took positions outside Isaiah's door, and Naomi raced toward the neighborhood in her rental car. Smoke was already visible on the horizon. She arrived to find Ruth Delaney being dragged from her porch by 3 officers. The elderly woman's robe was torn, her gray hair disheveled, her wrists bleeding from plastic restraints. "Mrs. Delaney!" Naomi jumped from her car and started recording with her phone. "Are you hurt?" "They broke everything," Ruth called out. "My husband's things, my students' pictures, everything." Naomi approached the officers. "I'm her attorney. What are the specific charges?" "Resisting arrest," Brooks said, without looking at her. "I see an elderly woman being brutalized for asking questions." Naomi kept filming. "Your warrant doesn't authorize this level of force for traffic violations." Captain Bale appeared behind her. "Turn that camera off. Public street, First Amendment right to record police activity." Bale grabbed Naomi's shoulder and spun her around. "I said turn it off." Captain Everett Bale of the Bellwether Police Department is now physically assaulting a civil rights attorney, Naomi said clearly into her phone camera, while his officers destroy an elderly woman's home without probable cause. "You want probable cause?" Bale shoved Naomi against his patrol car, pressing her face against the hot metal. "How about interfering with the police investigation?" "I'm broadcasting this live to 3 news stations and the ACLU," Naomi said through gritted teeth. "Your choice, how this ends." Bale held her there for 10 more seconds, then released her with disgust. "Cut her loose," he told the officers holding Ruth. But the damage was already done throughout the neighborhood. Every house had been ransacked, every family record scattered or seized. The systematic destruction of Founders Row's documented history was nearly complete. Then came the final blow. "Captain," an officer called from Isaiah's repair garage, "we got an electrical fire starting in here." Orange flames licked at the garage walls. Within minutes, the building was fully engulfed. Fire trucks arrived but moved slowly, their hoses producing weak streams that barely reached the blaze. "Electrical accident," Bale announced to the gathering crowd. "Old wiring. Very dangerous." At the hospital, Isaiah watched black smoke rise above his neighborhood. The garage where he'd taught 3 generations of young men to fix engines, to work with their hands, to build something useful. It was all burning. But more than that, he knew what the fire really meant. "They're destroying the evidence," he told Naomi when she called from the scene. Conrad kept talking about the first foundation. I think he meant the original courthouse basement, before they built the new building on top. What would be down there? Records they couldn't move, property deeds from the 1800s, foundation documents they needed to keep, but couldn't risk storing somewhere accessible. The garage burned for 3 hours. When the flames finally died, nothing remained but charred timber and twisted metal. After sunset, Naomi picked through the ruins with a flashlight, looking for anything that might have survived. Most of Isaiah's tools had melted. His workbenches were ash, decades of automotive knowledge reduced to smoke and memory. Near the back wall, her light caught something white among the debris. A photograph, somehow protected by a fallen metal cabinet. The edges were scorched, but the image was still clear. A young black woman stood beside a white man in an expensive suit. The woman looked familiar. The same eyes, the same determined expression Naomi saw in her own mirror every morning. She turned the photo over. In faded ink, Celestine Ellison and Conrad Renshaw, 1999, her missing mother, standing beside the man whose murder had destroyed Isaiah's life. That evening, Naomi burst into Isaiah's hospital room, clutching the scorched photograph. The image trembled in her hands as she held it inches from his face. You knew. Her voice cut through the quiet like a blade. You knew she was alive. Isaiah looked at the photo, Celestine's young face staring back at him across 25 years. The woman he'd promised to protect. The mother he'd helped disappear. Naomi, let me explain. No more lies. She slammed the photograph on his bedside table. That's my mother with Conrad Renshaw. The man who got you framed for murder. The man who knew about Crowell's land scheme. You've known this whole time. Isaiah struggled to sit up straighter, his ribs protesting. I thought she was dead. I believed it for 25 years. But you knew why she left. Yes. And you never told me. The weight of his silence hung between them like a wall. Isaiah had rehearsed this conversation in his mind countless times, but the words still felt like broken glass in his throat. Your mother worked as a records clerk at the courthouse, he began slowly. Third shift, filing property transfers and deed changes. Celestine was smart, too smart for her own good. She started noticing patterns. Naomi remained standing, her arms crossed. What patterns? Black families losing their homes to tax foreclosures that shouldn't have been legal. Properties being seized for amounts that didn't match the actual debt. Then those same properties getting transferred to shell companies within days. Crowell's operation. Crowell, the county assessor, certain bank officials, developers like Renshaw, they were stealing land systematically. But they needed someone inside the courthouse to make the paperwork look legitimate. Isaiah's voice grew quieter. Celestine started copying documents, building a file. She was going to take it to the state attorney general. What happened? Someone found out, probably saw her staying late, making copies she wasn't supposed to make. The night you ended up at that bus terminal, 3 men came to your apartment looking for her. Naomi's defiant posture cracked slightly. Looking for her how? With guns, with orders to bring her in alive if possible, dead if necessary. Isaiah met her eyes. Celestine barely escaped through the fire escape. She knew they'd come back. She knew they'd use you to get to her. So she left me. She saved you. She made me promise to keep you safe and never tell you why she disappeared. Because if Crowell knew you were her daughter, you'd have been in danger your entire life. Naomi turned away, staring out the hospital window at the city lights. I spent years thinking she abandoned me, thinking I wasn't worth staying for. You were worth everything to her. That's why she gave up everything. When did you know she might still be alive? 2 weeks ago, when Conrad approached me about meeting at the garage. He kept saying things like, your friend's mother and the woman who started this. Present tense, like she was still out there. Before Naomi could respond, Martin Pike knocked and entered carrying a manila folder. His face was grim but determined. I've been digging through archived payroll records, Martin announced, cross-referencing names, social security numbers, employment dates. You need to see this. He spread documents across Isaiah's bed. Highlighted entries showed a pattern of payments to various courthouse departments. Celestine Ellison officially stopped working in January 1999, Martin explained. But look at these records from the county maintenance department. His finger traced a line of entries. Someone named Sarah Caldwell started working night custodial shifts that same month. Same social security number as Celestine, but transposed digits. Close enough to slip past casual audits. Naomi leaned over the papers. She kept working at the courthouse? For 8 years. Different name, different department, but same building. She was still gathering evidence. Where did Sarah Caldwell go? Isaiah asked. Martin flipped to the final page. Employment terminated in 2007. Forwarding address listed as St. Bartholomew Church, Route 47, outside Bellwether's city limits. Naomi was already reaching for her coat. I'm driving there tonight. Naomi, wait. No more waiting. No more secrets. If my mother is alive, I'm finding her. At that moment, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. The security guards Isaiah had hired stepped into view, but they weren't alone. Deputy Brooks appeared behind them with an official document. "Court order," he announced, pushing past the guards. "Isaiah Garrison is to be returned to county custody immediately." "On what grounds?" Naomi demanded. "New evidence of flight risk. Judge Crowell signed the transfer an hour ago." Isaiah knew what this meant. Crowell had learned they were closing in on Celestine. The judge was moving to isolate Isaiah before they could find her. "This is harassment," Naomi protested, as Brooks began unlocking Isaiah's handcuffs from the bed frame. "Complaint filed with the court," Brooks said mechanically. Isaiah looked directly at Naomi. "If you're going to that church, you need to go now, tonight. I'm filing emergency bail paperwork, first thing in the morning." "If you win that hearing," Isaiah said as Brooks helped him to his feet, "I'm coming with you." The deputy was already leading him toward the door. "Visiting hours are over anyway." As they took Isaiah away, Naomi clutched the photograph of her mother. 25 years of questions were about to be answered, one way or another. The video connection flickered at 12:47 a.m., casting harsh shadows across Naomi's face as she stood before her laptop in the hospital parking lot. On screen, Judge Patricia Whitmore looked irritated at being woken for an emergency hearing. "Ms. Ellison, you're requesting immediate medical release for a murder defendant at nearly 1 in the morning. This better be extraordinary. Your Honor, the defendant is a 68-year-old man with documented heart conditions who was just assaulted by 3 inmates while guards stood by and watched. He needs immediate cardiac monitoring that the county jail cannot provide." Prosecutor Helena Voss appeared on a separate video window, her hair hastily arranged but her voice sharp. "The defendant is a flight risk who has already demonstrated violent tendencies. Medical care can be provided at the detention facility." "With respect, Your Honor," Naomi interrupted, "the same facility that allowed the assault? My client was beaten because corrupt officials want him dead before trial." "That's a serious accusation," Judge Whitmore warned. "It's a serious situation. I'm requesting temporary release under electronic monitoring with medical supervision. He poses no flight risk to the community." Helena's image leaned forward. "Ms. Ellison is using inflammatory language to distract from the fact that her client was caught on video committing murder." "Video that was tampered with," Naomi shot back. "I have evidence of digital alteration that the prosecution has refused to acknowledge." Judge Whitmore studied documents on her screen. "I'm granting temporary medical release under house arrest with electronic monitoring. The defendant will wear an ankle bracelet and remain within a 5-mile radius of Bellwether General Hospital. Any violation results in immediate rearrest." The connection ended at 12:58 a.m. 30 minutes later, Isaiah walked out of the county jail wearing a black electronic monitor around his ankle. Naomi and Martin waited beside her car, engine running. "Where exactly are we going?" Martin asked as they drove through empty streets. "To find my mother," Naomi replied, checking her mirrors for following vehicles. The drive to St. Bartholomew Church took 40 minutes through winding country roads. The old stone building sat abandoned among overgrown trees, its stained glass windows dark and cracked. Weeds choked the parking lot where ancient pavement met gravel. Isaiah tested the front door. Locked, but the wood's rotting around the hinges. They walked around the building, finding a side entrance where the lock had been broken years earlier. Inside, flashlight beams revealed pews covered in dust sheets, a collapsed section of roof, and water damage staining the walls. "If she was here, where would she hide?" Naomi whispered. Martin pointed toward the altar area. Maintenance records showed this place had a basement storage room. They found the trap door behind the pulpit, concealed under a heavy carpet. The hinges creaked as Isaiah lifted it, revealing wooden steps descending into darkness. "Mom?" Naomi called softly. A voice answered from below. Trembling, familiar, older than Naomi remembered. "Naomi? Is that really you?" Celestine Ellison emerged from the shadows like a ghost returning to life. She looked every one of her 61 years, her hair completely gray, her clothes worn and patched. But her eyes held the same intelligence Naomi remembered from childhood. "My baby," Celestine whispered, reaching toward her daughter. Naomi hesitated for just a moment before falling into her mother's arms. 25 years of anger and abandonment dissolved in seconds. "I thought you were dead," Naomi sobbed. "I thought you were safer that way." They held each other until Isaiah cleared his throat. "We don't have much time. The ankle monitor limits how long I can be away from the hospital." Celestine led them to a corner where loose floorboards concealed a metal box. Inside were deed books, payment ledgers written in code, and photocopies of fraudulent court orders. "This is everything?" Naomi asked. "Half of everything. The complete ledger is hidden somewhere else. Conrad was supposed to help me retrieve it before Crowell had him killed," Isaiah finished. Celestine nodded. Helena Voss altered the garage footage herself. She removed 12 seconds that showed Conrad arriving first, already beaten. "You were supposed to find his body and get blamed. Where's the rest of the evidence?" "In the courthouse foundation, behind—" The sound of car doors slamming outside cut her off. Footsteps crunched on gravel, moving fast. "Back exit," Isaiah ordered. They grabbed what records they could carry, but armed figures were already surrounding the building. Martin ran toward a side door to block it, shouting a warning as 3 men forced their way inside. "Federal agents!" one of them yelled, though his uniform looked wrong. Martin threw his shoulder against the side door as someone tried to push through. "They're not feds!" A gunshot shattered the silence. Martin stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. 2 men grabbed Celestine before she could run. She fought them, screaming for Naomi to escape with the records. Isaiah seized the bell rope hanging near the altar. His weight brought down a massive wooden divider that had once separated the choir loft. The heavy beam crashed across the center aisle, creating a barrier between them and the gunman. "Go!" Isaiah shouted. Naomi helped Martin toward a broken window while Isaiah covered their escape. Behind them, Celestine was being dragged toward the front door. "The courthouse foundation," she screamed over her shoulder. "Behind the cornerstone, 1967. Then she was gone, shoved into a black SUV that immediately pulled away. Naomi and Isaiah got Martin into the car, his blood staining the back seat. She started the engine as more vehicles arrived, their headlights cutting through the darkness. "Hospital?" Martin gasped. "No," Isaiah said, watching the SUV disappear down the mountain road. "They'll be watching the hospital. We need to get somewhere safe first." Naomi accelerated onto the winding mountain road, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, headlights followed at a distance. "Where am I going?" she asked. Isaiah studied the GPS display. "There's a maintenance access road about 2 miles ahead. During my Army days, I helped survey some of these tunnels. If we can reach the old water treatment system, we might lose them." The headlights behind them were getting closer. The headlights grew larger in the rearview mirror as Naomi pressed harder on the gas pedal. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. "How bad is it back there?" she called to Martin. "I'll live," Martin gasped, pressing a blood-soaked cloth against his shoulder. "Just keep driving." Isaiah twisted in the passenger seat, studying the vehicles behind them. 2 black SUVs matching speed, keeping their distance. Professional pursuit, not random chase. "They're waiting for us to make a mistake," Isaiah said. "Take the next right." "That's just a dirt road." "Trust me." Naomi yanked the wheel. The car bounced onto a narrow gravel path that wound between steep rock faces. Behind them, the first SUV struggled to follow. The second one held back, looking for another route. "Where are we going?" Naomi asked. Quarry access. I helped build these service roads 15 years ago when the city upgraded the water system. Isaiah pointed ahead. Keep left at the fork. The path narrowed until tree branches scraped both sides of the car. In the mirror, Naomi saw the first SUV stuck between two granite boulders, its driver reversing frantically. One down, Isaiah said. But the second vehicle had found the main quarry road. Its headlights appeared through the trees, cutting across their path at an angle. They're trying to cut us off, Naomi said. Isaiah spotted a metal control box mounted on a concrete post. Stop here. What? Stop the car. Naomi hit the brakes. Isaiah jumped out and ran to the control box, pulling a ring of old keys from his pocket. The third key opened the rusted lock. What are you doing? Naomi shouted. Emergency barrier system. They never removed it after construction. Isaiah threw a heavy switch inside the box. 50 yards ahead, a steel gate rose from the road surface with a grinding mechanical sound. The pursuing SUV's brakes squealed as it slammed into the barrier at 40 miles per hour. Steam hissed from its crumpled hood. Isaiah climbed back into the car. Go, that won't stop them long. Naomi accelerated through the quarry, following Isaiah's directions past abandoned equipment and flooded gravel pits. The eastern sky was turning gray with dawn light. Hospital's still 20 miles, Martin said weakly. We're not going to the hospital yet, Isaiah replied. Too dangerous. They reached the main road just as Captain Bale's SUV appeared in their mirrors. This one was undamaged, moving fast, closing the gap. How is he? Naomi began. Different route, Isaiah said. He knows these roads too. Bale's SUV rammed their rear bumper. Naomi fought to keep control as metal crunched and glass shattered. He's trying to spin us out, Isaiah said. The second impact sent them sliding sideways across wet asphalt. Naomi couldn't correct the skid. Their car rolled down an embankment, through tall grass, and slammed into a concrete drainage pipe. Steam rose from the engine. The windshield had spider-webbed but held. Everyone alive? Isaiah asked. Martin's unconscious, Naomi said, checking the back seat. Footsteps approached on the gravel above them. Captain Bale appeared at the edge of the embankment, holding a metal baton. His face was cut from broken glass, blood trickling down his cheek. Get out of the car, Bale ordered. Nice and slow. Isaiah opened his door, hands visible. Let them go. You want me? I want those records. Bale started down the slope. Where are they? Safe. Wrong answer. Bale raised the baton. Isaiah stepped between Bale and the car. The girl and the lawyer had nothing to do with this. This is between you and me. You should have minded your own business, old man. The first blow caught Isaiah across the ribs. He grunted, but stayed upright. Where are the documents? Bale demanded. Isaiah said nothing. The second blow hit his shoulder. The third struck his chest, driving him to one knee. Isaiah! Naomi screamed from inside the car. Stay down, Bale warned Isaiah. Tell me where Celestine hid those records, or I'll beat you to death right here. Isaiah struggled to his feet. You already killed Conrad. You won't get away with... The baton cracked against his skull. Isaiah fell against the concrete drainage pipe, blood running down his forehead. Last chance, Bale said. Behind Isaiah, Naomi was dragging Martin from the wreckage toward the tunnel entrance. She needed more time. The records burned in the church, Isaiah lied. You're lying. Bale raised the baton again. This time Isaiah was ready. As the weapon descended, he rolled sideways and grabbed Bale's wrist. Using the captain's momentum, Isaiah slammed Bale's arm against the concrete pipe. Bale screamed as his elbow hyperextended. The baton clattered away. Isaiah could have broken the arm completely, could have driven Bale's head into the concrete. Instead, he released his grip and stumbled toward the tunnel where Naomi waited with Martin. This isn't over, Bale shouted, cradling his injured arm. Yes, it is, Isaiah said, without looking back. By sunrise, they reached a small rural clinic where the doctor asked no questions about Martin's gunshot wound. While Martin underwent surgery, Naomi used her laptop to upload copies of the recovered documents to Adrian Mercer. "I've got enough here for federal arrest warrants," Mercer confirmed over the phone. "Judge Crowell, Captain Bale, Prosecutor Voss, the whole conspiracy." "What about my mother?" "We're tracking Bale's communications. We'll find her." By late morning, Mercer called again. "Federal marshals are moving now. We'll have Crowell, Bale, and Voss in custody before Isaiah's trial resumes. You'll have protection detail within the hour." Naomi looked through the clinic window at Isaiah, who sat beside Martin's hospital bed. Both men were battered and exhausted, but alive. "It's almost over," she whispered. That afternoon, Naomi walked through the courthouse doors expecting federal agents in the hallway and arrest warrants in hand. Instead, she found chaos. Adrian Mercer stood in handcuffs beside his government sedan. 2 courthouse officers held his arms while Captain Bale searched the vehicle's trunk. "What's happening?" Naomi demanded. "Federal investigator Mercer is under arrest for the murder of Conrad Renshaw," Bale announced loudly enough for gathered reporters to hear. "We found the murder weapon in his car." Naomi stared at the bloody wrench Bale held up like a trophy. "That's impossible. He wasn't even in town when—" "Evidence doesn't lie," Bale interrupted. "Unlike some people." Mercer caught Naomi's eye as they dragged him past. "The server's been wiped," he whispered. "Everything's gone." Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from Martin's clinic. "Attacked by armed men. Martin in emergency surgery. Building destroyed." Her hands shook as she read the second message from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. "Celestine Ellison, confirmed dead in vehicle fire. Body recovered from burned SUV on Highway 17. Investigation closed." "No," Naomi breathed. "She's not dead. I know she's not." "Ms. Ellison!" Judge Crowell's voice boomed from the courtroom entrance. "You will join me in chambers immediately." Crowell's office felt like a tomb. Heavy curtains blocked the afternoon light. Legal books lined dark wooden shelves, their gold lettering catching shadows from a single desk lamp. "Sit," Crowell ordered. Naomi remained standing. "Where is my mother?" "Your mother is dead, as is your federal investigator friend, as is any chance of you disrupting this trial further." Crowell opened a thick folder. "You are hereby suspended from practicing law in this courtroom for tampering with evidence, suborning perjury, and conspiring to obstruct justice." "You can't do this. I have the right to—" "You have no rights here." Crowell's voice turned cold. "Mr. Garrison will be represented by court-appointed counsel. Someone more appropriate." 20 minutes later, a nervous young attorney named David Walsh stood beside Isaiah at the defendant's table. Walsh had graduated law school 8 months ago and had never handled a murder case. "Your Honor," Walsh stammered, "I need time to review the file and—" "Motion denied," Crowell snapped. "This trial has been delayed long enough. Bailiff, bring in the jury." Helena Voss rose with predatory confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is clear. This security recording shows the defendant entering the garage at exactly 11:47 p.m. The altered footage played on the courtroom screens. 12 seconds had been removed so seamlessly that only an expert could detect the edit. The victim's blood was found on the defendant's work coat, Voss continued, holding up a plastic evidence bag. His fingerprints cover the murder weapon. This is not a complicated case. Walsh objected weakly to the blood evidence. Chain of custody. "Overruled," Crowell said, before Walsh finished the sentence. Naomi sat in the gallery, helpless to intervene. Every piece of exonerating evidence had vanished. The federal investigation had collapsed. Her mother was supposedly dead. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. "We find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree," the foreman announced. Isaiah showed no emotion as the verdict was read. His hands remained folded in his lap, his back straight. "Sentencing will commence tomorrow morning," Crowell announced. "The defendant will be held without bail pending final disposition." The courtroom emptied quickly. Only Crowell and Isaiah remained, along with 2 bailiffs waiting to escort the prisoner. Crowell approached the defendant's table and leaned close enough that only Isaiah could hear him speak. "You thought you could embarrass me," Crowell whispered. "Thought you could rally your little neighborhood against people with real power? By the time you see daylight again, Founders Row will be a pile of rubble. Every family you tried to protect will be gone." Isaiah looked up at the judge with calm eyes. "You can tear down houses, Your Honor, but truth rests where justice first learned to stand." Crowell frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing you'd understand," Isaiah said quietly. The bailiffs cuffed Isaiah's hands behind his back and led him toward the courthouse basement. Naomi watched from the hallway as they disappeared down the stone steps. Isaiah's words echoed in her mind. "Truth rests where justice first learned to stand." She'd heard him use that phrase before, years ago, when teaching her about Bellwether's history. The original courthouse foundation, where the first court sessions were held in 1889, where Celestine had worked in the records office, where the oldest documents would be hidden. The smell of smoke hung heavy in the air as Naomi crouched beside Ruth Delaney's kitchen table, studying faded courthouse blueprints by lamplight. Outside, police barricades stretched across every street entrance to Founders Row. Orange demolition equipment waited in the darkness like sleeping beasts. "They're starting at dawn," Ruth whispered, peering through a gap in the curtains. 40 officers, 3 bulldozers. They want us gone before the morning news shows up." Naomi traced her finger along the blueprint's basement level. The original courthouse foundation dated back to 1889, when Georgia's first integrated court sessions were held in Bellwether. Isaiah's words echoed in her mind. "Truth rests where justice first learned to stand." "Here," she said, pointing to a small room beneath the original judge's bench. "This archive was sealed in 1923 when they expanded the building. But look at these maintenance tunnels." Ruth leaned closer. The tunnels connected the courthouse basement to the old jail, the records building, and the utility systems Isaiah had helped install decades earlier. "He knew," Naomi breathed. "Isaiah knew they'd come for the evidence. He's been preparing for this." A soft knock interrupted them. Ruth opened the back door to reveal Adrian Mercer, his face bruised, but his eyes sharp. Behind him stood 2 young black men Naomi recognized from Isaiah's garage. "Marcus Williams and Devin Hayes," Mercer said quietly. "Isaiah trained them to box when they were teenagers. They've been watching the courthouse all week." Marcus, now 28 and built like a linebacker, spoke first. "Federal team cleared Agent Mercer an hour ago. That wrench in his car? Planted by the same cops who've been raiding our neighborhood. More important," Mercer added, "your mother is alive. We intercepted radio traffic from the courthouse basement. Crowell's holding her in the old records vault until he gets the complete ledger." Naomi's heart hammered. "She's really alive?" "Breathing and fighting, from what we heard," Devin said. He was thinner than Marcus, but moved with the precise balance Isaiah taught all his students. "She's been telling them the documents are hidden in 3 separate locations. Buying time." Mercer spread additional papers across the table. "Federal warrants will be ready by morning, but we need the evidence before Crowell destroys it. The sentencing hearing starts at 9 a.m. He'll use the chaos to move your mother and eliminate the records." "I'm going in through the tunnels," Naomi said immediately. "Too dangerous," Ruth protested. "Those passages haven't been used in years. They could collapse." "Isaiah maintained them," Marcus said quietly. "He taught us which routes were safe when we were kids. The entrance behind the old power station connects directly to the courthouse foundation." Mercer pulled out a small device. "Hidden camera with federal-grade encryption. Everything you record will transmit directly to FBI servers. They can't delete or alter the signal. Naomi studied the tunnel route on the blueprint. How long to reach the archive? 20 minutes through the main passage, Devon answered. But you'll need someone watching the exits. Courthouse security patrols those basement levels. I'll handle the demolition crews, Ruth said firmly. These old bones can still cause enough trouble to buy you time. Mercer nodded. Federal agents will be positioned around the courthouse perimeter. Once you have evidence of Celestine being held illegally, we can move in with full authority. They worked through the night, mapping every step. Marcus and Devon would secure the tunnel entrance and monitor police communications. Ruth would organize Founders Row residents to delay the demolition through legal objections and peaceful resistance. Mercer would coordinate federal backup and ensure the warrants were ready. Naomi practiced attaching the hidden camera to her coat lapel. The device was smaller than a button, but powerful enough to record clear video in low light. "What if Crowell realizes what's happening?" she asked. "He won't," Mercer said confidently. "His arrogance is his weakness. He believes he's already won." As dawn approached, the demolition crews fired up their engines. Residents gathered on porches and sidewalks, some carrying signs, others simply standing witness to their neighborhood's planned destruction. Ruth hugged Naomi tightly. "Bring them both home, child." "I will," Naomi promised. She slipped out the back door as the first police sirens wailed in the distance. The power station entrance was hidden behind overgrown vines and rusted fencing. Marcus had already cut through the chain link and tested the tunnel's stability. "Remember," he said as she prepared to enter, "Isaiah taught us to stay calm under pressure. Think like him in there." Naomi nodded and stepped into the darkness, carrying the emergency federal order that would either save Isaiah and her mother or expose them all to Crowell's final vengeance. 3 miles away, guards unlocked Isaiah's cell door and shackled his hands behind his back. "Time to face the music, old man," one sneered. "Judge wants this finished before lunch." Isaiah walked steadily toward the stairs, his mind focused not on the sentence awaiting him, but on the daughter he'd raised and the promise he'd made to protect her family's truth. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Judge Crowell surveyed his packed domain. Television cameras lined the walls, their red lights blinking like hungry eyes. Reporters filled every seat, notebooks ready to capture what Crowell intended as Isaiah's final humiliation. "Bring in the defendant," Crowell ordered, his voice carrying the authority of decades on the bench. The courtroom doors opened. Isaiah entered flanked by 4 guards, his steps measured despite the heavy shackles binding his wrists behind his back. But Crowell wasn't satisfied with standard restraints. "Additional security measures," he announced coldly, given the defendant's history of violence and flight risk. 2 deputies approached with a belly chain and ankle shackles. The steel links clinked ominously as they wrapped the chain around Isaiah's waist, connecting it to his wrist restraints. The ankle shackles followed, forcing him to shuffle in 6-inch steps. "Your Honor," the public defender protested weakly, "Mr. Garrison poses no threat to—" "Silence!" Crowell snapped. "This defendant murdered a man with his bare hands. The court will take appropriate precautions." Isaiah stood straight despite the humiliating display. His eyes found the cameras, refusing to bow his head or show defeat. The message was clear. Crowell wanted the world to see a broken old man in chains. 20 feet below, Naomi crept through the foundation tunnels with Adrian Mercer close behind. Her phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating brick walls that had stood for over a century. The air smelled of dust and decay. "Archive should be just ahead," Mercer whispered, checking his federal warrant one final time. They emerged into a wider chamber lined with filing cabinets and storage boxes. At the far end, behind a steel-barred gate, sat Celestine Ellison. Her gray hair was disheveled, her clothes torn, but her eyes blazed with defiance. "Mom," Naomi breathed, rushing to the gate. "Naomi, you shouldn't have come," Celestine said urgently. "This whole room is wired to blow. They're planning to destroy everything." Mercer examined the walls with his flashlight. Blocks of C4 explosive were taped to support beams, connected by thin copper wires leading to a central control box near the ceiling. "Professional job," he muttered. Military-grade charges positioned to collapse the entire foundation. Heavy footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. Captain Everett Bale emerged with his gun drawn, his scarred face twisted with rage. "Well, well," he snarled, "the famous civil rights lawyer playing hero. Too bad nobody's going to find your body in the rubble." Mercer stepped between Naomi and Bale. "Federal agent? Stand down, Captain." Bale laughed harshly. "Your federal friends are dead, Mercer. Car accident on the way here. Very tragic." He lunged forward, striking Mercer across the jaw with his pistol grip. The agent stumbled backward but stayed on his feet, blood streaming from his split lip. "Run, Naomi!" Mercer shouted, tackling Bale around the waist. The two men crashed into a filing cabinet, wrestling for control of the weapon. Naomi grabbed a set of bolt cutters from a maintenance shelf and attacked the gate lock. The metal parted with a sharp crack. "Where's the complete ledger?" she asked desperately as she helped her mother stand. Celestine pointed to a steel support column near the center of the room. "Inside the hollow beam. Look for the dedication date." Naomi found the inscription, 1952, Foundation of Justice. Below it, a section of the column had been welded back into place. She pried at the seam with a crowbar until it opened, revealing a leather-bound book and dozens of documents. Above them, Helena Voss's heels clicked rapidly across the courthouse floor, a small detonator clutched in her manicured hand. Meanwhile, corrupt guards suddenly grabbed Isaiah during a brief recess, dragging him toward a side door despite his lawyer's protests. "Transport irregularity," one guard announced. "Judge's orders." They hauled him down narrow service stairs into the basement levels. Isaiah recognized the route. They were heading toward the old archive. His engineering experience kicked in as he spotted the telltale signs: fresh tool marks on door frames, the faint smell of plastic explosive, copper wire traces along the ceiling. The guards shoved him into the archive chamber and quickly retreated, slamming the heavy door behind them. Electronic locks engaged with a decisive click. Isaiah surveyed the room methodically, his trained eye following the explosive network. Primary charges on the load-bearing columns, secondary charges near the filing areas, a central control system with redundant triggers. He shuffled closer to the main charge, studying the wiring configuration. Red wire to positive terminal, blue wire to ground, green wire as the trigger circuit. Working carefully with his chained hands, Isaiah located the primary trigger connection behind a loose brick. He bent the green wire until it separated from its terminal, disabling the main detonation sequence. A steel bar whistled through the air, striking him across the shoulder blades. "Clever old man," Silas Trent growled, stepping from the shadows with a crowbar raised. "But not clever enough." Isaiah spun to face his attacker, chains rattling. Trent was younger, stronger, and armed, but Isaiah had survived combat engineering in Vietnam. He knew how to fight when death was the only alternative. "Crowell figured you might cause trouble down here," Trent continued, circling like a predator. "Said to make sure you died screaming." The enforcer swung the crowbar in a vicious arc. Isaiah twisted sideways, letting the steel whoosh past his ribs. His chained hands limited his options, but his feet remained free. Smoke began seeping under the archive door. Emergency alarms wailed throughout the courthouse as Trent raised the crowbar again, his eyes promising violence. 20 feet away, Naomi clutched the recovered ledger and pulled her injured mother toward the tunnel entrance, knowing that Helena Voss was already racing to activate the backup detonation system that would bury them all. The crowbar crashed into the steel shelf above Isaiah's head, sending case files cascading to the floor. Trent pressed his attack, using his 40-pound weight advantage to drive the older man backward. "Come on, old-timer," Trent sneered, swinging again. "Let's see what all that boxing training gets you." Isaiah ducked the next blow, but the crowbar caught his shoulder, spinning him against a filing cabinet. Pain shot down his arm as Trent grabbed a wooden shelf and smashed it across Isaiah's back. Splinters exploded everywhere. "That's for making me work overtime," Trent growled. Isaiah dropped to one knee, gasping. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye. Trent raised the crowbar for a killing blow, but Isaiah rolled sideways at the last second. The steel bar struck concrete, sending vibrations up Trent's arms. Isaiah studied his opponent carefully. Trent favored his left knee when turning, the old injury from his corrections officer days. Isaiah had seen the limp during the earlier court hearings. "Getting tired, Grandpa?" Trent taunted, advancing down the narrow aisle between record shelves. Isaiah backed up slowly, drawing Trent deeper into the maze of filing cabinets. The space grew tighter. Less room for wild swings. Isaiah could control the distance here. Trent lunged forward with the crowbar. Isaiah stepped inside the arc, driving his elbow into Trent's solar plexus. The enforcer doubled over, wheezing. Isaiah followed with a short hook to the ribs, then pivoted away before Trent could grab him. "You little—" Trent swung wildly, striking a shelf support beam. The impact jarred loose files from above, raining papers around them. Isaiah circled back, forcing Trent to pivot on his bad knee. Each turn put stress on the old injury. Trent's movements grew stiffer. "Stand still and fight me," Trent roared, charging forward. Isaiah sidestepped, letting Trent crash into a tall filing cabinet. The metal unit rocked backward, sending more files tumbling. Isaiah landed 2 quick body shots before dancing away again. Smoke thickened around them. The fire was spreading faster now. Trent coughed, wiping his streaming eyes. 20 feet away, Mercer helped Celestine toward the tunnel entrance. She clutched the ledger against her chest like a shield. "This way, Mrs. Ellison," Mercer urged, supporting her weight. "We're almost out." Trent spotted them moving, his face twisted with fury. "No witnesses!" He abandoned his attack on Isaiah and sprinted toward Celestine, raising a jagged piece of broken shelf like a spear. Isaiah launched himself forward, tackling Trent from behind. They crashed into a massive steel records rack, their combined weight toppling the entire unit. "Move!" Isaiah shouted to Mercer and Celestine. The steel rack groaned and tilted. Trent scrambled to escape, but his leg caught between 2 fallen shelves. The rack completed its fall with a thunderous crash, pinning Trent beneath hundreds of pounds of metal and files. "My leg!" Trent screamed, trapped but alive. "You broke my leg!" Isaiah ignored him, racing to the exposed wiring near the main support column. The backup detonation circuit blinked red. 5 seconds to ignition. His chained hands fumbled with the connections. 4 seconds. He pulled the copper wire free from its terminal. 3 seconds. The red light continued blinking. 2 seconds. Isaiah spotted the secondary trigger wire, nearly invisible against the concrete. He yanked it loose with his fingernails. 1 second. The red light went dark. The archive fell silent except for Trent's moaning and the distant sound of sirens. Upstairs, Naomi raced through the courthouse corridors, clutching a federal emergency order. She spotted Helena Voss near the main staircase, a small detonator gripped in her hand. "It's over, Helena," Naomi called out. "The evidence is already in federal custody." Voss spun around, her composed mask finally cracking. "You self-righteous bitch. You think you can destroy everything I've built?" She pressed the detonator button. Nothing happened. Her face went white. "That's impossible," she whispered, pressing the button frantically. Naomi advanced up the stairs. Your whole conspiracy just collapsed. Voss screamed and lunged at her with manicured nails, aimed at Naomi's eyes. The two women grappled on the marble steps, Voss fighting with desperate fury. Naomi grabbed Voss's wrist, slamming her hand against the stone railing until she dropped the detonator. With a final shove, Naomi sent Voss tumbling down 3 steps. The prosecutor lay gasping, her perfect hair disheveled and her suit torn. Naomi snatched up the detonator and continued toward the courtroom. Inside, Judge Crowell raised his gavel with theatrical authority. The defendant having fled justice, this court sentences Isaiah Garrison in absentia to... The courtroom doors exploded open. Naomi strode down the center aisle, federal emergency order held high, cameras tracking her every step. "Stop this proceeding immediately," she commanded, as hidden camera footage flickered to life on every screen in the building. The courtroom screens blazed to life with crystal-clear footage. Judge Crowell's voice filled the chamber, cold and calculating as he spoke into what he believed was a secure phone line. "Kill the woman. Make it look like an accident. We can't have her talking about those records." Gasps erupted from the gallery. Jurors stared in horror. News cameras captured every shocked face. The hidden recording continued. Crowell's image leaned back in his leather chair, discussing jury manipulation like ordering lunch. "Remove every black name from the list. I don't care what excuse you use. Property taxes, parking tickets, whatever. Just make sure they never see the inside of my courtroom." A reporter's voice cut through the stunned silence. "This is live footage from Judge Crowell's chambers, recorded earlier today." "Turn that off!" Crowell roared, hammering his gavel. "This court will not be subjected to—" But the screens showed more. Crowell authorizing the jail attack on Isaiah. Crowell approving the garage fire. Crowell laughing as he described how that old man should have known his place. Naomi stood at the prosecution table holding a thick leather-bound ledger above her head. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the original record of 30 years of systematic theft from black families in this county." The courtroom doors opened again. Federal agents entered first, followed by a frail but determined woman with silver hair. Celestine Ellison walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Mom!" Naomi's voice cracked with emotion. The gallery erupted in chaos. Spectators stood on chairs, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed like lightning. "Order! Order!" Crowell screamed, but his authority had evaporated. The screens still displayed his recorded confessions. Helena Voss tried to slip through the gallery crowd, keeping her head down. Federal Agent Mercer spotted her near the exit. "Helena Voss, you're under arrest," he announced, stepping into her path. Voss's composure finally shattered completely. "This is insane. You can't prove anything. That recording could be fake." 2 agents flanked her as she struggled toward the door. Her designer heels clicked frantically on the marble floor. "Everything I did was legal," she shrieked as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I was protecting this community from criminals." A private door behind the judge's bench burst open. Captain Bale charged into the courtroom, his service weapon drawn, his face purple with rage. "You destroyed everything," he bellowed, pointing the pistol toward the crowd. 20 years of work, my pension, my reputation." Screams filled the gallery as people dove for cover. Bailiffs reached for their weapons, but Bale was already inside their perimeter. "This is all his fault." Bale's wild eyes searched the courtroom. "Where is he? Where's that old man?" Smoke drifted through the archive passage. Isaiah emerged slowly, his clothes torn and blackened, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He limped heavily, but moved with deliberate calm. "I'm right here," Isaiah said simply, stepping into the light. Bale spun toward him, weapon raised. "You cost me everything, old man. You should have stayed quiet. Should have known your place." Isaiah didn't flinch. He kept walking forward, his hands visible and empty. "What's my place, Captain?" "In the ground." Bale's finger tightened on the trigger. Isaiah continued his steady approach. "You want to shoot an unarmed man? In front of all these witnesses?" "Stop moving." Bale's voice cracked with desperation. But Isaiah kept coming, drawing Bale's attention away from the terrified crowd. Each step forced the corrupt captain to pivot, to focus only on him. "Shoot me then," Isaiah said quietly. "Add murder to your list of crimes." Bale fired into the ceiling, plaster raining down. "I said stop!" He lunged forward with the weapon extended. Isaiah sidestepped at the last moment, grabbing Bale's gun arm and slamming it down across the wooden rail that separated the gallery from the court area. The impact trapped Bale's wrist between Isaiah's grip and the solid oak barrier. Bale screamed as his weapon clattered to the floor. Federal agents swarmed him immediately, pressing him face down against the rail as they secured his arms behind his back. "You're finished, Bale," Mercer announced, retrieving the dropped pistol. Judge Crowell had vanished from his bench during the chaos. Naomi spotted the private door to his chambers standing open, smoke wisps drifting through the gap. She raced toward it with Mercer close behind. They found Crowell frantically feeding documents into a small fireplace, his judicial robes singed from flying sparks. "Destroying evidence, Your Honor?" Naomi asked, holding up her phone to record. Crowell spun around, his dignified mask completely gone. His white hair stood on end, his face streaked with ash and sweat. "You want money?" he gasped, pulling out his wallet. "I have accounts in 3 states, offshore investments. Take whatever you want." The recording captured every desperate word. "Justice isn't for sale," Naomi replied coldly. Crowell rushed toward a narrow stairwell hidden behind a bookshelf. Naomi blocked his path, arms spread wide. "Going somewhere?" Heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell. U.S. Marshals appeared, their badges gleaming under the chamber lights. "Thaddeus Crowell," the lead marshal announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, civil rights violations, and racketeering." The handcuffs clicked around Crowell's wrists as the hidden camera captured his final humiliation. A video screen descended from the ceiling, showing the face of the state's chief appellate judge. "In light of this evidence," the chief judge announced, his voice carrying through speakers, "the conviction of Isaiah Garrison is immediately and permanently vacated." Minutes later, Crowell shuffled past Isaiah in shackles, his head bowed in defeat. Outside, demolition crews in Founders Row received radio calls ordering them to shut down their equipment and leave the neighborhood immediately. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Isaiah walked through the heavy oak doors, flanked by Naomi and Celestine. His shoulders were straight, his head high. The man who had shuffled into this building in chains now moved with quiet dignity. Founders Row residents filled every step, their faces bright with relief and joy. Mrs. Patterson clutched her deed, the real one, returned by federal marshals just hours earlier. Old Mr. Jacoby waved his original property papers, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Isaiah!" someone called from the crowd. "You did it!" He paused, looking out over the sea of familiar faces. These were his neighbors, his family, the people he had protected for decades. "We did it," he corrected gently. Camera crews captured the moment as federal agents escorted the last conspirators from the building. Captain Bale stumbled down the courthouse steps in orange prison clothes, his arrogant swagger replaced by the shuffle of defeat. Helena Voss followed minutes later, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled, her expensive suit wrinkled from a night in holding. She avoided the cameras, covering her face as reporters shouted questions about her falsified evidence. The weeks that followed brought a parade of justice. Courtroom after courtroom filled with hearings as federal prosecutors systematically dismantled the corruption network. Each session revealed new depths of the conspiracy's reach. Silas Trent pleaded guilty to attempted murder and arson, receiving 15 years in federal prison. His employer, the private security company, lost its license and faced massive civil penalties. The property reviews moved more slowly, but more thoroughly. Teams of federal accountants, historians, and legal experts examined every deed, every foreclosure, every suspicious transaction dating back 30 years. One by one, families received calls that their stolen homes were being returned. The Reynolds family got back the house they had lost to a fraudulent tax lien. The Washington siblings reclaimed their grandmother's property, seized through a manufactured drug case. Dozens of families discovered they still owned land they thought was gone forever. Founders Row itself received permanent protection under federal historic preservation law. No developer could ever threaten it again. The neighborhood that Crowell had tried to erase would outlive him by generations. Isaiah's wrongful prosecution settlement arrived 3 months after his release. The state paid him $2 million, a fortune by any measure. But instead of moving away, instead of seeking the comfortable retirement he deserved, Isaiah bought the burned remains of his old garage. Construction crews worked through the summer, rebuilding the structure from the ground up. But this time, it would be more than a repair shop. The sign above the main entrance read, "Garrison Trade and Justice Center." The ground floor housed fully equipped automotive and electrical workshops where young people could learn valuable trades. The second floor became offices for Naomi's expanded legal practice, offering free representation to families who had been ignored by the system for too long. Martin Pike, recovered from his injuries but walking with a slight limp, joined Naomi's team as her senior partner. His experience with local court procedures proved invaluable as they worked to represent clients throughout the county. Celestine accepted the position of records director, her encyclopedic knowledge of Bellwether's hidden history making her indispensable. Her office contained files on every property transaction, every suspicious foreclosure, every pattern of corruption that had plagued the community. The grand opening arrived on a crisp October morning. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.